Pockets have them, collars have them, bodice fronts and bodice backs have them. Every major manufacturer of a pattern puts them on every piece. And what is that? It's the grain line. The fabric will wrap the body in a more flattering and comfortable fashion if you pay attention to grain line. Almost everyone has had a pair of jeans at some time in their life where the legs seem to twist on their body. That would be because the grain was off. The lengthwise threads are the warp threads that are strung onto the loom in the beginning of construction of fabric. Warp threads have virtually no stretch as they are held taut through the whole construction process. The weft threads are those put on the shuttle that are woven in and out of the warp threads. There is a slight stretch with the weft. The 45-degree diagonal to the warp and the weft is the true bias of a fabric. It has the greatest stretch and often has a very flattering drape. Woven fabric may be formed from many different configurations of the warp and weft threads, but there are three most common weaves. They are the plain weave, where the warp thread is woven under and then over the weft thread, one thread at a time. This is a very stable fabric and it has no right or wrong side unless it is printed. The satin weave, where a shiny warp thread is woven across several weft threads, creating a very shiny fabric. The top side of the satin fabric is shiny while the underside is dull. And the twill weave, which is woven by passing the weft thread over one or more warp threads and then under two or more warp threads, and is offset between rows to create the characteristic diagonal pattern. The twill weave is more drapeable than the plain weave. The other garment fabric is knitted fabric, and they're made from a single yarn or a set of yarns. A knitting machine forms loops in the yarn and links them to one another by means of needles. Knitted fabric consists of crosswise rows of loops called courses, and they have the greatest stretch, and lengthwise rows of loops called wales. The loop structures make knitted fabric more elastic than woven fabric, yet you still need to use the grain line layout. Although single knits may run, the edges do not ravel, but they may roll. Gravity is the law of physics that makes grain line so important. To get the drape designed by the pattern maker, you must lay the pattern on the fabric following the exact grain line. Finishing processes may have pulled the bolted fabric off grain. Pre-washing and shrinking of your fabric is the first step in relaxing the fabric into the naturally perpendicular state in which it was woven. To assure that the fold line is on the lengthwise grain, you must have the top edge of your fabric in line with the crosswise grain. You can locate the crosswise threads in two ways. You may grab a hold of one of the weft fibers and pull across the fabric, creating a little line that you can use to cut on to straighten your fabric. After both ends of this piece of fabric were straightened, you can see that it went from thin to wide on the lower side and from wide to thin on the upper part. You may find the crosswise grain of a length of fabric by putting a clip on the lengthwise selvage and tearing across the entire width. This will follow the thread that was the crosswise thread in the weaving process. I hope with your understanding of grain line, all of your garments will be successful and that there will be no twisting and discomfort in anything you make.